Good morning, everybody, and thanks for checking in to our latest TDR Trade to Black podcast. I am your host, Shad Dales. What a week it's been. Not sure if you guys got a chance to watch that speech last night. What'd you think of all that? Interesting to say the least. But the reason why you want to listen to the podcast here today, a really good thought leader, president of a major association out of the state of Pennsylvania, will walk us through what's going on within that state based on the news that happened earlier this week, as well major crackdown on illicit cannabis shops in New York City this week. We got some pretty interesting numbers to share with you that maybe show some signs of life for the state of New York. So on that note, let's welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varrell, and a happy Friday morning. Good to see you.
Happy Friday. So it's good. It's the last Friday in the comment period. We bring this baby to a close on Monday. I think we're at about 35,000 comments right now. It could hit that 40,000 number over the weekend. So we could be getting closer to the higher range of the expectations that we were saying as the comments roll in.
Got to hand it to Guap, man. He had a pretty good guess. It was around 42,000, the 420 mark. But according to you, he's over. So you win that bet, right?
It's Price is Right rules.
Price is Right rules. All right. Lots going on this week, including there was big news. So let's welcome in. He actually is the president of the American Trade Association of Cannabis and Hemp, Michael Bronstein. Good to meet you, sir. How are things?
Things are good. It's great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, we wanted to have you on. We reached out to our network, and they said we've got the right person you want to speak to with regards to the news that, obviously developed out of Pennsylvania. Was shaking my head because how this got missed. I don't even know where to begin. But before we get into that, I just want to set the table straight, and make sure everybody knows who you are and your background. So maybe talk to us a little bit more about what the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp is and some of the initiatives that you guys work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp was founded 10 years ago. This year is our 10th anniversary year. I'm the president and co-founder of the organization. We are the largest 501c6 trade association that represents the cannabis as well as hemp industry. And we've been at this for a number of years. We have a number of state level MOU partners, and we also have been leading the national charge on a number of key industry initiatives. We're pretty, we've been pretty involved in most everything that's been going on,
yeah.
And have taken a very heavy hand in promoting policy, making sure that the legal regulated market has good representation, both federally and at the state level.
Were you involved in politics prior to this?
I was, and still involved in politics.
I would think
to a large extent. And I think my role here, mostly every day dealing in politics, but I originally worked on campaigns. In a previous life, I helped manage the Labor Party's design and political publication unit for Tony Blair's last election in 2005.
Wow. Okay.
And when I came back to the States after that experience, was working on campaigns at basically all levels of government. And advising elected office holders and those who are running for office. And that was really how I got tapped to come into the cannabis industry. It was really on the basis of what I was doing politically at the time.
So go ahead, Anthony.
I mean, we're going to dive into a lot of, I guess, focused topics, but I mean, being in the industry now for 10 years, I mean, we're on the cusp of a lot of regulatory change. The fundamentals in the industry are at an all-time high. Looking back, did you expect us to be here 10 years ago, or did you expect us to be somewhere far more down the road in terms of progression?
No, I thought we'd be much further down the road than we are right now. I mean, if you had told me 10 years ago that the banking issue wouldn't have been solved in the industry yet, that some of the issues around taxation wouldn't have been dealt with, and that there would have been so little progress to some extent on this. I think that we all at that point would have been surprised at where we sit right now, and also how the industry developed. The thesis that was brought into the industry with how the industry was going to develop is being challenged, constantly. So constantly. So I think that the view of what people thought was going to happen versus what was going to happen is very different. And there are a lot of folks who.
So why is it happening? Like, why are we at the 11th hour where something has become so complicated? Like, is it a generational thing? We seem to think that it just brings some new lifeblood in to like politics. But do you feel strongly about that too? I do. But what do you think?
Yeah, look, a lot of people see this as a generational issue, and it is. Like, it is a generational issue. When I ask my parents what they think of the issue, they have a different view than I think than I have. And I have a different view than probably my kids will have at some point, where they'll see it much more as a much more normal and more probably like an alcohol type industry. And by the way, that's if we do it right. If we do it wrong, right, there'll be a totally different view potentially with what the industry looks like. Which is why right now we're at a pivotal moment, and we have like a real responsibility here to shape the industry the right way. Because if we don't do this the right way, we're going to have a problem.
Can you imagine if there was podcasts back in the 1930s during Prohibition for alcohol?
And I mean, as far as that lack of progression goes, I mean, obviously we're not here to point fingers on either side. We've all been living in the same country and in the same political climate for the last 10 years. Do you chalk it up to it's just a function of the political dysfunction, the dysfunction of the political climate that we're in? The industry has lacked influence in the chambers of government in Washington and also on the state level, or kind of just a mixture of both. And that's gotten us here today.
Yeah, it's all of the above. And this, by the way, this is a very complex issue, and because cannabis touches everything, right? Mm-hmm. It touches financial reform. It touches social equity. It touches all of these different things, and it doesn't neatly fall into political sightlines. And it's also an issue that, quite frankly, the issue itself, it doesn't really win or lose people elections per se.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a good and a bad thing. Right. Yep. It's a good thing in that it becomes less politicized. Right. It's a bad thing in that the pace of the movement of doing things is often at a glacial pace. Yeah. So glacial pace. So I mean, that's the kind of issue that we have. And from an advocacy perspective, I think that the reason why, and I say this as someone who's been in advocacy for a while, and I very well could be the most tenured leader of an association right now, just because of all the turnover that's happened over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And what I would say to you is that what we have seen along the way and the reason why it's been hard for industry to organize, as well as advocates to organize, right? Is that all of these different issues are going on. All of these different issues are going on at once, and the prioritization from a political perspective is sometimes unclear as to what to be attacking when. So there's a lot of that.
How do you clarify that? And this is where I'm saying, like, we as an industry need to be in Washington, I think, more and communicating more. Like when we were there in April, we kind of had an idea to what to expect, but even when you're going into something and you actually see it, you're still surprised as to how little a lot of people really understand, like where we're at and the perception out there regarding the industry. It's mind blowing. And, when you sit here and look at various states that are going broke, it's just like the tax revenue that's great is like through the roof. And yet they're still stuck in this Nancy Reagan just say no era, which is mind boggling to me. But I'm in Canada. We federally legalized it in 2018. You know how much we talk about it now? Like hardly anything. It's not a big deal. And I think the same thing probably would happen in the US, where it'd be big news off the top. And then gradually over time, it would just be part of society. Don't you think?
I do. And the thing is that what happens in the United States impacts the worldwide cannabis market, even though it's been liberalized, right? Like a lot of the problems that we see happening in Canada right now, some of them at least, are due to the fact that the United States hasn't moved quickly enough, right? When we talk about the financial market situation, a lot of that is part and parcel because of the agreements that are had between the way capital flows and the way that markets are regulated, which, like it or not, emanate from the United States' influence over those markets.
So one thing,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Chad.
I was just going to say, like, any news related to Florida, what moves the Canadian LPs? Though that's the,
it's liquidity. I mean, it's liquidity and it's access. I mean, Canopy's leading the route. Not to get into the capital markets conversation now, but I mean, Canopy's leading the last 2 weeks. As far as the cannabis rally goes, that's been sued, and it's access to capital and liquidity and an uplisting. But I mean, one thing that's been a super hot button topic this week has been Pennsylvania. News broke out that the adult use legislation was not going to be able to get over the line in this budgetary session within the legislature. There's been a lot of actual posturing from Shapiro. I mean, what is the current status, in your opinion, of the potential adult use framework in the state of Pennsylvania, and what are some common misconceptions, I guess, that you've seen along with the reporting coming out of the state?
Yeah, as a finer point, and just to sort of qualify what I'm going to say about Pennsylvania, is that, I've been involved in one way or another in Pennsylvania marijuana advocacy for over 10 years. And it was really sort of how I got started nationally on this issue and working on medical marijuana. And that was the thing that, I was very passionate about.
So if there's a short list of people that want to know what's going on in Pennsylvania pertaining to cannabis, you're on that list. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, I've been involved in the Pennsylvania issue for years. And to me, I feel very positive about the types of discussions that happened around the budget and how these conversation advanced forward, especially looking at where we came from, right? So we had the governor come out in the budget, call for it. Okay. There was a serious discussion coming to the budget table about whether marijuana legalization would happen in the context of the budget. And I think that the conversation advanced to a point where it's never advanced before in the state. And just because it didn't get done, the way that Pennsylvania budget cycles work, but also the way that Pennsylvania politics have worked, is that once that conversation is open, it's not going to get closed. It's going to continue to be talked about until it actually happens. And so the way that I view it is, now that we know where the lines are drawn in Pennsylvania, right? And you've got the governor saying, hey, this needs to be legal. And by the way, the governor also said yesterday that with the budget lines that were left on the table, and this wasn't the only issue, there were other issues that were left out of the budget, said, look, we need to address these issues. And just because we weren't in this budget doesn't mean that we're not going to be addressing these issues. I also think that Republicans on the Senate side preferred not to deal with the marijuana issue in the budget, and they preferred to deal with it outside of a budget situation. It's not like, what I would say to you is that it's not a huge priority for them. And within their caucus, there are certainly either pushback or people who are not necessarily for it in the caucus. But there are also people in Pennsylvania, unlike in some other states, where there are Republican champions in the Senate. And in this budget process, we saw the first bipartisan House bill ever introduced in Pennsylvania, or co-sponsorship memo that was circulated between Representative Coffer and Representative Kincaid, so a Republican and a Democrat. So that to me is measurable progress going forward. To be clear, not as quickly as we would like to see it advanced. We wanted this done in the budget.
Yeah.
But it does set up a runway to get this issue taken care of.
As far as, I guess, as far as timelines go and expectations, I mean, obviously it's politics, so we never can really nail down what that would look like. Is it safe to say that this might get done within the next 12 months as like a base case going into the end of the year, and then obviously the political session resuming come Q1 of 2025?
I would feel very comfortable, you know, if there was an over under. I mean, I'm taking the under on that. I mean, I think that's, to me, that is definitely you know, that's definitely in a time frame.
Well, you're from Philadelphia.
Another thing,
go ahead.
Another thing that was something that I saw that was dispelled by somebody that I spoke to that I wanted to get your opinion on was Pennsylvania has a state-controlled liquor industry, and there was language from some pundits around, well, certain members of the government were trying to implement a state-run cannabis business or cannabis industry. Is that fallacy, or is that something that was actually on the table as it relates to the framework?
So in terms of it being on the table, in terms of the framework, it's an idea that is discussed in certain corners of the legislature, but it's not one that's politically viable in terms of making it into a final bill. And we heard Senator Street say it, who is arguably right now the godfather of cannabis legalization in Pennsylvania, with the advocacy that he's been doing on this. And he said at a press conference just last week, you know, that, look, there's no way that state stores pass the Senate. And here's the thing. State stores actually in Pennsylvania, what people don't understand is that the fight over state stores is not necessarily a fight between whether alcohol should be sold in state stores or not. The way that it's viewed is that the state stores are unionized and have union workers in it. And Republicans have spent a lot of time trying to rid the Commonwealth of the state store system because of the politics there around the organization of the stores. So it actually has to do much more with much more of those politics. And like, it's kind of an issue that has held up a number of budgets before. And it's an issue where there are dividing lines in the state. So the object with the marijuana legalization movement is to show people that these two conversations don't actually go together.
So you're from Philadelphia. You like sports betting. You said 12 months. I'll take the under on the over-under with that. How about 6 months?
I still think 6 months puts us what? We're in July live today. So what's that put us in a January? So you think a January situation?
Late Jan.
It can happen within 6 months.
So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
I think it's a matter of, I do think it's a matter of when. Is it going to happen in January? Is it going to happen in, like, everybody's kind of playing the same parlor game. And I promise you, like, none of us are getting a prize for
I hear you.
Whether we get the date right. I'm telling you, it's going to happen.
How much are these neighboring states having an impact on the decision making? Does that have any influence whatsoever that have passed adult use?
Yeah, when the governor spoke about it, he talked about the problem and the issue being other states are legal around us and, you know, potentially eating our lunch or taking, taking tax revenue. And even went as far as to say, even and in his way, this is his language, you know, friggin' Ohio, right? Even has this, right? Is what he said it's what he said. Is what he said in his budget speech, right? Yeah. So he pointed that out, and you're looking at that, and then I know that industry and businesses, you know, we have a lot of concern that there's bleed on the border, you know, on this, you know, on this as well. And that's going to matter. That's going to matter in state. It's going to be much more significant, you know, over these next several months than it has been previous. Do
we have an idea tax revenue wise as to what this state will produce once both adult use and medicinal is, well, medicinal is already in play, but once adult use is passed?
So there was a study that was commissioned. The most recent study was done by a group called Responsible PA, and it was commissioned with FTI Consulting, and the number in the base case that was come up with was about $420 million of tax revenue that would be added in the first year base case. So
wow,
reoccurring, it's a lot. I mean, it's a good amount. And with this budget, the thing is that going forward, there's going to be a need. There wasn't really as much of a need in this budget because there was a lot of money that was still in a rainy day fund. Going forward, there's going to be a need for the state to figure out revenue projection, find it.
2-3 years from there, the Sixers get their new arena, right?
Yeah, that's that's the big question. Do they deserve a new arena right now? I think is the real, is the real discussion.
Right.
I'm a little tepid on that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
After what they've done to my own life, this is personal at this point.
Anthony, fire away.
I was going to say, does Governor Shapiro finding his way into, let's say, the Democratic ticket potentially, does that change the political calculus at all for any of this without his stewardship as the governor, if he's to be replaced?
So what you would have is you'd have lieutenant governor would become governor in that case. I do think that it's a priority. It would be it's a priority for any Democratic administration going forward. And, I think that the other thing is that it's good politics right now at the national level, certainly on the ticket. Look, it's widely speculative as to whether or not, at least at this point, we would see, we would see a replacement, and that the replacement would come from Pennsylvania. But should something like that happen, I don't think that it necessarily changes the fundamental dynamic of the desire to get this done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wanted to address the news this week where the legislators approved a budget bill that the governor signed into law. However, lawmakers accidentally left medical marijuana dispensaries out of a section providing tax relief for the cannabis industry. So first off, what happened here?
Yeah.
Always important to proofread what you do, right? What happened was, and this was the explanation that came out of it. So here's the thing. When everybody's sitting around and doing budget deals and budget negotiations, the room is like fairly closed.
Yeah.
And there's less vetting of language that goes on. So generally what people like to do is they like to take stuff that either has already had some movement on it or has already had some action on it in the legislature. That's usually sort of the best way to get language into a budget, right? Okay. And in this case, the drafting that had gone on, and this is sort of the wide account that we've seen in this, that went on in the legislature. There's a drafting error as it went back and forth to what in Pennsylvania is called the Legislative Reference Bureau, which is where all of the legislation that goes through the House and the Senate is formulated in order to comport with law. And in that process, what happened was there was there's a line right at the end of it that calls into question about whether or not 280E would be applicable to dispensaries, because it only covered when you take the piece in whole, it only covered grower processors. So there are ways to go forward on this. The legislature didn't want to do that. That was not the legislative intent, and everybody knows that. And I have to say that previously this had been negotiated in a budget a couple years ago. It was brought to the table, and what happened is like, all right, we all have to do this. And revenue was like, no, 280E doesn't apply in Pennsylvania because all these businesses are LLCs. And they basically told folks at the time that, no, you're fine with this. You shouldn't have an issue, on these things. And they issued guidance. So the intent was there. The intent is there. And there's a long history of intent. So the question is, will there be more guidance issued down the line?
So there was at one time 280E they felt did not apply. Am I understanding that correctly?
On the state level taxation portion of it. So not at the federal, that like the Pennsylvania can't say whether or not from a federal perspective that would, right. So it's sort of the state level deduction that you would have on it that they were talking about. And Pennsylvania felt like, and not to get, too far down the line on this, but what Pennsylvania thought at the time was that 280E, because of the ways these businesses were incorporated, that it didn't apply from a state perspective. But I think the state has the wrong read with how businesses are actually incorporated on this.
So moving forward based on this miss, like, can the omission be fixed without further legislative action, or does that still need to take place?
So that's what we're going to find out in I think the coming weeks and coming months, because there could be a situation where revenue could say, well, actually, this is good enough for us here, and this is the guidance that we issued around it. Or they could say, wait a second, like, if you think that needs to, that this is the read, we do need to go back in and change the law. And I think the fact that it passed shows that there's a willingness to do it. The question is, like, how long is that going to take if they come back and they do it? So we're going to know much more on this in the next couple of weeks. I think that there's a will to get rid of this. And fix it.
We're getting some comments in here. Bernie Sanders is coming back. Anyone want to bet? Here we go with the political front now.
I will heavily bet against that. But I mean, another polarizing thing that,
what's that?
Yeah, I mean, he really did never leave. That's actually a pretty good point. I mean, one thing that's been super polarizing around the cannabis space, let's say the past couple of months, has been hemp. How much of what you do is actually involved in hemp? And I mean, with that, again, going back to that, having that 10 years of experience within the sector, did you think that hemp would be where it is today, all things considered, looking back at what the Farm Bill's original implications were and what it's actually become?
Yeah, no. And I don't think that anybody had that. I don't think that anybody had that written. I mean, when I was talking about it, I remember talking about it at the time, the question was there enough sort of THC byproduct to where you'd have this idea that some of it was federally lawful, yet the other portion of it was federally unlawful. The idea that people would read the Farm Bill and say, okay, well, this derivatives language, if we create a synthetic product, that synthetic THC is somehow lawful, but natural THC is unlawful. That I don't think anybody could have predicted. And the problem that we have right now, like, we have to be honest as an industry, right? If we're going to sell intoxicating products, which is the large majority of what, a significant majority of what the industry does, we have to say what they are. Okay. We have to actually say the way to get to full legalization is to actually not hide what it is that we're doing. It's to be responsible about it. Right. So if we come out and we say, okay, with a nod and a wink, this is a hemp product. And by the way, the American public, like, forget the way we think about it. Like, if you were to poll most people, they don't know that hemp is intoxicating, because the advocacy that was done around it, ourselves included, we said that hemp was non-intoxicating. So when you have these products in market that are labeled as hemp, but they're intoxicating products, it creates some level of consumer confusion around it. And I would also argue that the idea of selling synthetic THC products to the public under the guise of calling them hemp causes an issue. It causes a huge policy issue, but it also causes a public health and safety issue, to which the entire industry, will be tarnished if we do that. If we want to sell these intoxicating products, let's do it in a lawful fashion and in a way that we make the law clear under a regulatory perspective. And I'll add one other thing here, right? The Farm Bill is one part of this.
Okay.
Correct.
Just one. It has not changed the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act, right? And so the marketing of products right now, even under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, is still not expressly permitted at the federal level. The difference between enforcement and whether it's lawful, right? Those are not the same things. We have to get to a point where it's actually federally lawful.
So how probable is that from happening?
So I think in the Farm Bill is really not a good place and was never a good place to legalize cannabis, because something that is authorized every 5 years means that we're fighting a battle every 5 years. If we were to legalize cannabis under the Farm Bill, that we would be fighting this every 5 years. And I think there's a little bit of revisionist history going on here. I mean, I was there for 2018. I was there in 2014. I was there, right? I saw the whole progression of where it was. And if you look at where it was to where we are now, right? We look at something like CBD, which was supposed to be expressly permitted under the, we all believed that it was expressly permitted, right? We don't even have regulation around that. So the idea that we're going to see regulation through the Farm Bill on intoxicating hemp products, many of which are synthetic THC products, it seems to me that becomes much more gray and much more unclear going forward, and that is a concern.
Do you see them being able to strip out, let's say, the intoxicating product language out of the Farm Bill and somehow amalgamate it with what's going to go on at large with cannabis within, let's say, the rescheduling framework for like the state regulated industries, or just something coming out from the FDA, the DEA, HHS, someone to just tackle intoxicating hemp products and get it out of the Farm Bill where it shouldn't be in the first place?
The problem that you're actually speaking to from a larger public policy perspective is that the industry needs one regulator.
Correct.
And you can't have this is untenable. You can't really have a position where some products are regulated and other products aren't, and there's a question about lawfulness about it's either they are or they're not, right? It's
Correct.
that's how you get to a real industry. That's how you get to the economic promise,
right,
of this industry.
So are we going to have to do that through the courts? Because I mean, that's what's going on in crypto. You have the SEC and the FTC fighting over who does what. How are we going to define X? And they can't come to terms. So the legislators just throw their hands up in the air and like, we're going to let them figure it out. And the only way that they've actually gotten meaningful reform, and they still haven't even gotten anything that's a semblance of meaningful reform, is working through the courts from a litigation perspective and proving their cases throughout.
This can happen through the courts. You look at major social issues, you look at some business issues that have happened, and the courts are the third leg of the stool a lot of times for policymaking. And we say, okay, well, the courts aren't really supposed to be wrapped up, or they don't do that. Courts do that every day of the week and twice on Sunday sometimes. So I think like from a legal strategy, like ATACH has always been involved in these in litigation. Like we'll be involved in the scheduling litigation. Right. Okay. We'll be leading the industry. We're leading the industry effort on that. And we help form the Coalition for Responsible, rescheduling. And we also believe here that, we also are taking a view here that very well could be a way that it happens. And what I would say to you with scheduling reform and CCSR with what we're doing, it was interesting to me that when HHS produced the recommendation, that they said that synthetic THC, irrespective of the outcome of scheduling, that synthetic THC would remain a Schedule I substance, right? So to me,
did they say why? Did they say why?
They didn't say why, only in that they tipped their hand that that's what they believe. They believe synthetic THC is a Schedule I, irrespective of the scheduling process.
Does that have any implications on like what GW Pharma potentially did with Epidiolex? No, because that's synthetic CBD. It's not synthetic THC.
Also, that went through an FDA. Also, that went through an FDA process. I think to me, that was a straight, like that to me, when I read that has implications on the hemp intoxicant industry, right? Because if it's synthetically made, that's sort of what what would be being looked at.
Yeah, because I mean that goes down a whole different rabbit hole when you look at HHC, THC 0, Delta 8. I mean, they haven't even done like safety studies on animals or humans, much less being able to say anything like this is actually safe for consumption versus like the traditional cannabis products or any of the naturally derived cannabinoids. to an extent. So, I mean, I'm for that. Just wipe the synthetics clean and keep them as far away from the traditional industry as possible.
Lack of transparency. You only know what you know, right? And this clearly is what's going on behind the doors with this industry. If there was another color that represented cannabis outside of green, it would be gray. There's just a lot of stuff that people just don't know.
Yeah.
But one thing we've had on, and I know you're friends with Eric Berlin as well, but he mentioned to us last week, we need a lot more support from executives in this space in Washington. And we just need that. Why do you think, like, I don't understand. I don't know that side of it. I don't want to like speculate, but why do you think, there hasn't been more of a voice from, you think, different members of like, executives in this company in Washington? And do you see that changing?
I do see that. I think it's changed over time, right? It's not
Have you?
fixed. It's not fixed, but it's better than it was.
Okay.
I think it's better than it was. And I
And
think
you think it will continue to get better?
it has to, because there's no other
It has
choice.
to.
It just has to, right? Because that's going to be the natural movement of it. And part of it is that, look, when in the state by state environment, what happened is you had people had business models that were predicated on different state regulations. So there wasn't necessarily natural alignment relative to larger scale issues with how people solve the federal policy development.
Right.
So what happened is like, okay, a number of years ago, it was like, well, let's pick the 3 issues that everybody can align upon, right? We all know we want banking. We all know that you got to get rid of 280E, right? We all know that we've got to move to a federal legalization system, right? So there are North Stars here on that. But there has to be sort of a thesis, right? This is what we're doing as an association right now. We're trying to provide leadership and a thesis as to how this is going to work from a regulatory perspective, because then you can back into the politics and how people buy into it. Okay. Like part of it is that, you didn't have people leading the industry, right? The industry was being led by what the interest of the day, or what the flavor of the day was on some of those things.
Good point.
Having like a North Star. So that creates factionalism in and of itself. And that's not like the fault of executives. They have a business to run, right?
Yeah, totally.
But, and like, look, and I'm not laying the blame on like, we
don't want to blame. It's just, we want to find solutions. But do you think, like, what is rescheduling if it were to announce? Like you said, it's going to get better over time when it comes to messaging, but do you think that opens up the doors even more? And I asked the question a couple months ago as to like how various politicians, would they look at things differently in the event cannabis was rescheduled? They didn't really understand what rescheduling was pertaining to it. But I think once the announcement is made, that's obviously going to be something that they're aware of, which means they'll probably look at this from a different shed of light. But one can only hope that once that does happen, it opens up more doors and more opportunities for key messaging in Washington, I would think, right?
Yeah. And the education. So I used to like to take people into DC, right? And this was we're in DC every day of the week, right? But the thing that I like to do when people fly in from all over the country and they're business owners and we're taking them around is I used to really like to ask the question of folks and say, look, however you answer this, please answer it honestly to congressional staff or members of Congress.
Okay.
And don't worry about your response here. I just want to prove a point. Like, do you know what 280E is?
None of them knew it.
Most of the time they didn't. And people were so taken aback by the fact that they would sit there, something that they were dealing with every day, that they felt like, Congress should know about it.
I know.
Right. And I said, look, it's not their responsibility to know about it. It's our responsibility to educate them about it. All right. That's our fault that they don't know that. So we have to regroup and we have to educate and we have to do the things that we have to do. And the other thing is there has to be a sense of professionalism with this. Yeah. Okay. There has to be a sense. DC is used to being talked to in a certain way. And the cannabis industry, what I've been spending my professional career trying to do is professionalizing that voice so that it's received. Okay. So that the message comes across to where it can actually be received and heard.
Thank you.
In a way that they understand.
Thank you.
That is what has to happen. And that is what we're focused on doing.
You can't have people showing up with signs and basically saying this, like that's not going to get anywhere. It's, but But one thing's for sure, Anthony, I think next time we go to Washington, we should probably set up a call with Michael 24 hours in advance, maybe come up with a game plan and strategy on some key messaging. But this has been great. Really good. Last question I'll leave with you. We get rescheduling announced before the election. What do you think?
I think it's right within that window. I think it
Okay.
could be right there. I think it could be before the end of the year, or or a changeover of of administrations. I think that we could very well. I think we're very well within a zone here. The thing that we're watching is potential challenges to this. We're watching to see if there'll be an ALJ hearing on it, but I think we are right in the window here of getting something done.
Yeah. Hopefully that opens up the doors and greatly enhances the chances of safe banking passing as well. Keep hearing lame duck, but I'm not going to speculate off of that. But one can only hope. That would be incredible if both were to pass. But listen, you came highly recommended for some of the sources that we have close relationships with in this industry. And I'm really happy we've got a chance to connect. And I think our viewers probably got a lot out of this pertaining to Pennsylvania and as well just the whole hemp industry and really the landscape that goes on in Washington day in and day out, and what are the key messaging. I think the big takeaway is that it's not the politicians' fault, it's our fault, because the right messaging and not enough messaging is taking place in the nation's capital, right?
We have more to do, and we're here to do it. And I don't absolve myself from that responsibility. I take it on.
Well said. Let's keep in touch, okay?
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Michael.
All right. Thanks, Michael. That was a great conversation, was it not?
Yeah, it was great. And I mean, he can't be more correct. It is our responsibility to inform them.
Well said.
And to craft that narrative. I mean, when we did our initial trip to Washington, my knee-jerk reaction after talking to 3 politicians was, why the hell don't they understand rescheduling? Took a step back, understood what was actually going on. And then not only is it not a legislative process, it's an agency matter, which they have hundreds of things going through the docket on a daily basis. It's not their responsibility to know about what our agenda is. It's our responsibility to craft that agenda and then communicate it to them in an effective manner to where it dials in that they need to be more well-educated on this, because it is something that's a pertinent matter in society. Until we do that at scale, politicians aren't going to be well-versed or educated on the cannabis space.
Which is why people like Kim Rivers, all those people have always said, like, call your local officials and just create more awareness, because if we want change, like, this is what it's all about. It's not just these companies and executives within the actual industries that are going to make changes. It's actually you, the people that are interested in the space. But listen, we're at the 42-minute mark. Let's head into the wire. I want to begin with news involving multi-state operator, the Cannabis Company Holdings, where they announced their California brand Old Pal Classic. It's gone national, as many people know that follow the space. Now entering in another state, the Garden State of New Jersey. Why is this important, Anthony? And why is this brand done so well to really create a national footprint?
Yeah, so the cannabis has brought the cannabis has brought online Old Pal into New Jersey, as well as Maryland and Virginia. They're launching several different form factors, larger ground up ounces of cannabis, infused pre-roll packs, multi-packs of pre-rolls. I mean, Old Pal is a brand that now has gone coast to coast. They were started in California. They're in key markets such as Arizona, Pennsylvania, now New Jersey, Virginia, and Maryland with the cannabis. This is just an overarching theme of the strategy that David and Jesse have went out to implement as broadening out their brand portfolio, creating more offerings at both ends of the scale, from a value and from a premium perspective, to speak more to the consumer. It's just another step in their brand process, and it's good to see that they're executing, especially with differentiated products such as infused pre-rolls.
Yeah, and for anyone interested in the Cannabis Company Holdings story, we have reached out to them, hoping to get them back on. We want to get an update as to things developing in the state of Delaware as well, right?
Yes. Delaware is going to be big for them. Delaware should be going adult use early 2025. They're one of the big beneficiaries from an MSO perspective. That are willing and ready to capitalize on the Delaware market.
Yeah. Great feedback from a lot of guys. Great guest. Anthony Gambino writes, yes, indeed, Mark Landers, we need to educate the public. Yes, agreed with that. But yeah, I think ultimately at the end of the day, it was a great interview. But kudos obviously to as well the Cannabis Company Holdings for expanding their national footprint with their brands. But let's now switch to Minnesota. Some news this week that I think will make some cannabis investors happy, where the Minnesota Office of Cannabis Management issued a formal warning to roughly 4,000 retailers in the state to quit selling prohibited cannabis products, including, drumroll, intoxicating hemp-based cannabinoids like THCV. Finally, somebody is actually paying attention and a little bit of transparency is taking place, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is good to see. And I mean, I think this is just the tip of the spear from like a public service announcement on the impacts and the dangers of intoxicating hemp products when it comes to the synthetically derived stuff. This is good to see, but at the same time, I've always been under the impression that when it comes to drug policy in this country of illegal drugs, that there's kind of a zero tolerance here. Yes, it's good that they're putting out the announcement. Yes, it is good that they're giving these retailers a forewarning. But if you are selling illegal products by definition or harmful products to a consumer, your business needs to be shut down. You don't need to just be like, hey, guys, we know you're doing this. Please stop doing this. I want to see what's going on in New York with Operation Padlock, where they're just going in and shutting shops down because they're not operating within the confines of the law. There's plenty of people out there that are going to buy Delta 9 naturally derived hemp products. There's plenty of people out there that are going to buy it in different form factors. There's no reason to sell these broad spectrum synthetically derived hemp intoxicating products if they're not legal and they're not in the best interest of the public. It'd be nice to just see them stop being sold altogether.
Yeah. So it's kind of the things that Michael just outlined. There's a lot of like various elements to this space in the early stages where they're the 280E tax. You know, you talk about banking, but in this case, when he brought up the whole idea of social equity, there's people that are spending 20 years in jail for a small possession of cannabis. Meanwhile, you have black market illicit cannabis shops spread out all across states. And I can't imagine what's going through some of these people's heads to think that I've spent 20 years in jail for a small possession. Meanwhile, there's like actual black market dispensaries where it's quote unquote from a lot of local officials right now that it's not a major priority. We have more important things to worry about. That blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a very important point. I would probably take the other side of that and say that it's probably a bigger condemnation on the system. The fact that there's legal shops that are operating and there's a legal framework.
Good point.
That completely justifies the substance in the plant, saying that, okay, it's okay for you to sell it. It's okay for you to consume it. But you happen to tote the line 2 decades ago for a very small amount of cannabis and you're in jail. I think it's a very good point on your end from an illegal perspective, but I think the legal market is an even bigger reason why absolutely none of those people deserve to be spending another minute in jail if they are a minor cannabis offender that is nonviolent. Yeah. Which is obviously the most important part to that equation.
Yeah. Good friend of ours from Safe Harbor Financial, Tyler Burline. He's a friend of the podcast. If anybody has a LinkedIn profile, add him to your list. He had a great post this week, but it outlined some of the dispensary owners and some ribbon cutting pictures from 2 years ago in Trenton, New Jersey, and how since then he's had to lay off 75% of his staff because of the black market that continues to emerge in New Jersey right now. And I know that's something that we touched on a couple of weeks ago, but listen, got to make progress. And as I switch to our next topic, it looks like we are making some progress as we move to the state of New York and some positive news this week. You mentioned it was Operation Padlock is what it's called. It's an initiative by New York City Mayor Eric Adams' administration to curb illegal marijuana sales. They announced that they've successfully shut down 75 unlicensed cannabis shops this week alone, which to me is rather encouraging. It's still a long ways to go, but Anthony, it's a start, right?
Yeah, it's great. Judge basically said your suit has no bearing. You're not operating within the parameters of the law. That's great. Operation Padlock, again, it's making progress. I'd like to see something just sweeping. Manhattan is not a very large area of land. Just get it done. Get all of these just out and weed them out and shut them down. Yeah, and just cut off the head of the snake.
Yeah, 1,500 estimated 1,500 illicit cannabis shops in Manhattan alone, around 3,000 across the state. I think when you see those numbers, it just blows my mind still how this state just went the wrong way in a hurry.
Very much so.
All right, my friend. I think that pretty much covers off everything today. We're at the 50-minute mark, so I'll let everybody run. But got some great feedback. I hope people really liked the video that we created yesterday pertaining to just an explanation of both rescheduling and safe banking, and just really understanding where we are today, but what could happen. But that was an idea that I came up with, and literally it was just a spur of the moment. And 20 minutes later, I recorded it and we did a bunch of editing. But judging on the feedback, there's a lot of people that really found it really helpful. Wasn't sure because I know a lot of people are pretty much up to speed on both rescheduling and safe banking that follow this space, but glad everybody really enjoyed it. If you haven't gotten a chance to do so yet, make sure to check out our YouTube channel after this live stream, and outlines the title, Rescheduling and Safe Banking Explained. So let us know your feedback, leave some comments below. And speaking of comments, let us know what you thought of Michael Bronstein here today, and shedding some light on the Pennsylvania market. And talking about 6 months in and around that we could see adult use pass in Pennsylvania. And he still believes that rescheduling will be in and around the election time. So some great takeaways from that. What's on the agenda for you this weekend?
Nothing. And
Chilling?
It feels awesome.
Yeah. Are you finally getting some sun again in southern Florida?
Oh yeah, it's sunny right now. Actually, I might go to the driving range later this afternoon after the market closes. I'll probably wind up there again a couple times this afternoon. This weekend.
How hot is it there?
90.
Pretty spicy.
It's 90 with humidity.
7 weeks from this weekend, buddy. Week 1 of the NFL season. Sports scene's pretty quiet, but that's all right. It's summertime. People are away 1 week, back the next, and then they're gone again the following week. But this is the time of year it is. But gear up for a busy fall. It's going to get busy past post Labor Day. Also, we have our Small Cap Sunday podcast this week. We actually are going to highlight Jushi Holdings. We initiated coverage with them last week, so make sure to click that QR code in the lower right-hand corner. As well, are you familiar? It's a cannabis tech company called Cannabis Technologies. Have you heard of that company?
I have not.
That is a microcap company that we actually dived into as well. So not one, but 2 cannabis companies that we will highlight in Sunday night's Small Cap podcast, and whether or not we would own these stocks or not. So make sure to log on 8 o'clock Sunday night for all that. And as usual, make sure to subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. You've had some great takeaways this week with some of the stuff that you've outlined within that newsletter.
It's fun to write every morning.
Yes, and we're seeing lots of it's rising in a hurry too, the amount of people that are subscribing. So appreciate everybody out there. And leave some comments below. Let us know what you think. What are your plans for the weekend? We'd love to hear from you. Leave some comments. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day and weekend, Anthony, and we'll see you back here Monday afternoon.
Talk to you guys.
Take care. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.